Today's episode of the BS Podcast brought to you by SeatGeek, our presenting sponsor. The easiest way to shop for the best tickets thanks to their revolutionary grading system. Buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps on your phone. 2 taps! Everything fully guaranteed. House, did you know that my listeners get $10 off baseball tickets the first time they use SeatGeek? Did you know this?
$10 off in just 2 taps. Let's do it!
Use promo code BSMLB. Download the SeatGeek app today or go right to SeatGeek.com. We are also brought to you by Miller Lite, the official sponsor of TheRinger.com. Brewed not only to taste great, but also to be less filling. Only 96 calories. It won't fill you up. It's brewed to be enjoyed from tip-off to final buzzer. The original light beer, and has been since we first showed up courtside in 1975. By we, I mean Miller Lite. I'm on the team. And finally, we are brought to you by Larry Wilmore's new podcast, Black on the Air, Cousin Sal's new podcast, Against All Odds, and Joe House's podcast, Shack House, which is going to be talking about the Tiger Woods thing today. I might ask you about that when you're on this podcast, too. Here's Pearl Jam. We are going to start it up. All right, in studio with me, Bryan Curtis, editor-at-large, TheRinger.com. On the phone, Joe House, longtime BS Podcast Hall of Famer, host of the Shack House podcast. A lot going on today. House, I know you're talking about Tiger on the Shack House pod, but let's talk about it with Bryan Curtis for a second. It just made me sad. I don't want Tiger to be involved in memes. I don't want to see his mugshot face floating around on these different internet things that get sent around the world. This is a sad ending now. I derive no joy whatsoever from this.
Not one drop for me. None.
Yeah, if you look at the word cluster, isn't that what the millennials do these days? They create word clusters based on what word appears in stories.
Yeah.
The most predominant word, the word that's gigantic in the middle in all caps, is sad. Every single story that I've seen out there from the golf commentariat, as well as the broader sports punditry at large, everybody's observing how sad this is. There are a couple of curiosities. I think as the story kind of develops, there will be a couple things to kind of focus in on. It was slightly weird to me that it was important to him in his statement to say that alcohol wasn't involved, and instead to sort of posit that it was the combination, an unexpected reaction to the combination of prescription medication. Not sure that's much better.
Yeah, and like when you're asleep at your car and you're so incapacitated that you can't drive, I don't really think it matters what's running through your blood, just that you were that incapacitated and you had to pull over.
Yes, and the other thing is 3 a.m. I mean, what World Wide West, what's the World Wide West rule?
Don't chase the night.
Don't chase the night.
What's your take, Curtis?
Is there any athlete we have gone through more emotions with than Tiger Woods?
No.
I mean, now we've reached this new thing, right? I mean, who else in American history have we hit all these things with, from the pure joy when he started, to kind of wishing for him to fail, to the affairs, to now this, when we're saying, oh, we can't even take joy in this. We're just purely sad that it's wet. Like, who else had that many stages? The
only one, BC, that I can come up with is OJ.
Oh.
Yeah.
That just made me sad. Jesus.
But I don't even think with OJ, we had the extreme murder portion of his career.
Very extreme.
Extreme.
I don't think we had the sort of slow wind down, the breakdown of his, his body, the affair thing where it's like, all these horrible feelings that we have for the guy are coming out of the box, the press conference thing like Tiger had. I mean, he seems like a guy who's been lost now for 8 years, and he was a golf machine forever. And then golf got taken away because first his body broke down. Then he had all this personal stuff. He couldn't quite get it back. His body broke down even worse. In these last 5 years, he seems sad. House, I know you've talked about it on your pod for the last year, and you guys were in the corner, you and Shackelford, about, here it comes. He's coming back. This time it's going to be it. We all wanted it so bad. Every single sign from these last 4 years said that this guy's body had broken down
and it was not coming back. Did you really believe he was ever coming back?
Yes, I did. The performance that he put on in December at his own little event, this charity event, the Hero Challenge down in the Bahamas, where he went out and shot the best round of the day, and I can't remember the number off the top of my head. It was either 65 or 66, a bogey-free round where, he was rolling in putts unexpectedly from all kinds of different lengths, and he had that hop in his step, and his look was super focused. I thought that was going to be potentially the launching pad into a spectacular 2017 in the sense that he was going to be able to play a couple times a month. And then January rolled around, and he missed the cut at Torrey, but it was only a couple holes that undid him. And then he got in the airplane and flew to Dubai, which probably in retrospect was a mistake. Now, I know that there was an appearance fee incentive there, and, reestablishing himself on the world stage after signing brand new ball and equipment deals with TaylorMade and Bridgestone made a lot of sense. But the dude stunk in his first round out there, and then he just withdrew because the weather forecast through the rest of the tournament was bad, and at least the next couple of days. And, it was clear he was, walking awkwardly out there on the golf course, and he blamed some of it on, the jet travel.
So he had,
and that was really it.
How many back surgeries? 4?
4 now.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone should ever get back surgery unless they're just completely incapacitated. I think Steve Kerr would agree with me on this. I don't know how bad Tiger's initial situation was, but it just doesn't seem like it's a great list with the back surgery. Then you throw in his plant knee, the right knee. That's the knee that he had to have all the other surgeries on. Once a guy gets operated on, 9 times, that seems like a lot. That's my biggest fear with Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin's 27. He's been under the knife all these different times. And, I feel like we should have seen this coming, and we kind of didn't want to see it coming. Right, Bryan?
Oh yeah, I mean, we're when I talk about emotions, we're rooting for the comeback. I mean, it has. And the only reason I think it, and I'll defer to House on all matters of golf commentary. Yeah, it has to happen, right? Even if it's just a rando tournament. Yeah, that he comes back and wins. Like a Colonial, like we had this last week. I mean, it just feels like it has to happen. It's the sports. It's the next sports story.
It's a sports movie.
How are we not going to get one more moment to be like, oh, Tiger, we love you, buddy. That was great. Is it really? This is going to be it. Mugshot.
Yeah, usually it either you have the sports movie comeback or you have the complete flame out, and this was really neither. This was a slow, steady fall to where we ended up on Memorial Day, which somehow was the second holiday that he's had issues with. But it was like this 8-year steady, slow march to this point. It wouldn't make a good documentary, I don't think. It wouldn't make a good sports movie either. It's in the middle. I don't know what it is.
And I think that's why the emotions are so heightened, because we're all struggling with it, right? There's no sports movie. The music's not swelling. Here he comes. Ben Hogan, back from the car accident, right?
Right.
We got it. Now it's like we don't know what to think.
Yeah.
Well, we're hopefully, if you're a glass half full kind of guy like I am, especially when it comes to the Tigre, hopefully we're in the wistful montage. He's a lot of long looks out the window while it's raining outside. He's on the train. He's working out on the treadmill. He's lifting weights. That's the montage here. And you have to remember, he's only 41. You can be good at golf in your 40s. There's lots of guys who are good at golf in their 40s.
Yeah.
The forecasted timeline for him to come back after this last surgery is, again, like November, December. So he could play again in this event down in the Bahamas where he kind of whet all of our appetites again. And so, again, if you want to glass half full it, you don't have to throw the dirt on the coffin yet.
Yeah. I think it's really tough for these guys when they've hit a certain point that only a few of them have ever hit, because MJ's had his own issues, you think of post MJ after retiring, then he comes back 02 and 03, then he retires again, and really struggled to find that same level of competitiveness, led to that crazy Hall of Fame speech, which was the first time we all kind of looked at each other and said, oh, wow, this guy's in kind of a dark place. And I don't know, when you've reached heights like that and you were just the OG, Tiger hit heights that I'm not even positive LeBron has hit. Like in my lifetime, I feel like it's Tiger, Ali, and Jordan were the only three I ever saw got to that kind of invincible level. Maybe Brady after this last Super Bowl, where just everybody agreed, wow, we're never seeing anybody like this person again.
Yeah, and Tiger hit a mystical stage
Yeah.
that LeBron never hit.
He won the U.S. Open with a torn ACL.
Nobody said LeBron is Gandhi.
Right.
But you could almost believe it with Tiger. You could almost believe it.
That's right. I mean, there was a moment when it was a legitimate conversation about who was more popular or more well-recognized, not necessarily popular, Tiger Woods or Barack Obama, kind of worldwide. Who do more people know? Do they know Tiger or do they know Barack?
That was 2008, right? Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think when that gets pulled away from you and you've been disgraced the way he was after the Thanksgiving incident and he loses his family and the one, he never says really anything interesting in interviews. And I think he's managed to be a closed book for his entire career. That one time with the Charlie Pierce profile in like 96, 97, and he let loose and Charlie ran some of the jokes and that was it. Tiger closed the door. The one thing that I gleaned from these last round of interviews was he just kept pushing his family, how important his kids were, how, I love being there for my kids. I drive my kids. And he just was kids. It was like, he was like this lost guy. This was the one thing he could grab on was that he was a dad.
And don't forget the Santa Claus tweet, right? Where he had the little beard. He also, Alan Shipnick from Sports Illustrated had a tweet over the last 24 hours where he said Tiger was just kind of coming out of his shell a little bit because he was so desperate.
Yeah.
And was kind of giving a little more to journalists and being a little bit better. And you could see him kind of like thinking, oh, I got to give more because nobody cares.
But it was a strange choice of journalists, right?
It was I think it was actually Shipnick, right? In the last big Sports Illustrated.
Oh, that's
piece.
right. Yeah. So that wasn't strange, but there was another one like he was very revealing. What magazine was that? Golf?
I think it was Time.
Yeah, Time magazine. And then there was another. I thought it was like, what was it? House like it was a foreign magazine, right? I thought there was one he gave.
I don't remember. He did a thing with Wright Thompson also, or maybe Wright Thompson did a piece.
He didn't he conspicuously didn't do a thing with Wright Thompson.
Yeah, he didn't. He was.
He did not do it with Wright. That's right.
Yeah. So I don't know, and I don't know where this goes for him. I agree with House. I think it's weird that they were so adamant that it wasn't drinking. Like that's a worse sin than all these meds. And it was like he was on meds. I had a friend of mine emailed me today who was like, I've done some drugs. I've never heard of 3 of these drugs. Like these were like heavy prescription drugs. And it makes me wonder, like, you know, how, like, is it going to come out? He had like a serious prescription drug dependency.
Oof. Because, right. That's what's kind of the background here.
Yeah, because you're talking about somebody whose body was in a lot of pain. I don't want to speculate on this. I'm guessing like if it leads to the point where you're in front of your wheel, asleep on the side of the road at 3 a.m, you have a bunch of different prescription drugs running through you. That leads me to believe that over the last 6-7 years, as his body broke down, you know.
If we're doing Mad Lib's sad Tiger thing that happens, that would be the obvious one to put in.
Right.
Next. Absolutely.
Prescription. I've been addicted to these.
Brett Favre period.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it happens. And it's happened to a lot of people. And you go from, oh, my back hurts, take this, to, all right, I'll take 8 of these instead of 4. And, oh, I'm going to take 16. And it spirals. And it would certainly explain, you know, a lot. But as House said, he's only 41. I can't quit Tiger. It's like Brokeback Golf Mountain. I can't quit Tiger yet. I still feel like this will be the wake up call. Maybe this will be the one that gets him back, because the skills no matter how much your body is broken down, the hand-eye is still there. And we saw Nicklaus win the Masters in '86 with like a broken body, basically, and a pot belly, and he'd had back surgery. I mean, It's not inconceivable that this can come back, but man, it feels. What would you put the odds, House?
Oh, not great. I mean, the other thing, I'm glad you mentioned Nicklaus. He was 46 when he won that Masters, I believe.
Yeah.
But in any event, yeah, odds of coming back, 15-1 at best, I would say. 15-1.
To come back and do anything?
Well, I
to be relevant again on a weekend in a major that mattered.
Oh my God, that's much higher than 15-1. Relevant in a major, because the amount of work that has to go into that, the lead up to that. I mean, we were just wanting him to play competitive tour golf this coming season, and he had invested all of the time, and all of the signs were good through the balance of 2016, all the way up to the moment where he shot that bogey-free low score of the day. Again, it was only against 19 other competitors. At his event down in the Bahamas, it was like, okay, this is the thing. We watched the round. He scrambled around. He hit driver well. His length was there. He was hitting the ball as far as any of the other guys. So like this was the marker to demonstrate that he's gonna, he can go ahead and compete again. But like competing in a major is a whole nother animal. I mean, the odds of that are like that's 50-1, I would say.
We're taking a quick break to talk about CreditWise from Capital One. You know what? Numbers are great. Whip, WAR. How many Masters did Tiger win? What was he up to? Like, was it 6?
He won at least 3.
God, somebody's great when you can't remember how many Masters they won. Anyway, on their own, numbers don't tell the story. Credit isn't any different. With credit, it's all about how well you perform against the factors that go into a credit score. How good are you at paying your bills on time? How much credit do you have spread across different accounts? How long have those accounts been open? All those factors impact your credit health. And since there's no one single score that lenders use, knowing these factors are key. CreditWise lets you track the factors that make your credit health using information from your TransUnion credit report. The app can help you spot errors or identify theft. It lays out information you need to understand your behaviors and how they impact your credit health. Plus, you can check it anytime without negatively impacting your credit. And the best part, 100% free for everyone, whether you're a Capital One customer or not. Step up your game. Download CreditWise today. Last note on Tiger. If this is 15 years ago, I was thinking about this because Frank Deford died yesterday. Obviously, we're going to talk about that. That's one of the reasons I want to have Bryan on. If this whole saga happens 25 years ago, Bryan, how is it? How is the coverage different? How is our perception of what's going on different?
I think this story is pretty much the same. This part of the Tiger story, the mug shot, we don't probably see it quite as much 15 years ago. It's not as easy to see. Certainly 20 years ago.
Yep.
Pre-internet, it wouldn't be passed around in that same joyous way that mugshot was passed around yesterday. I think his previous thing is the one that would have been really different, because it would have been interesting to see how much the respectable media really touched it. We would have probably heard from one or two fewer Waffle House waitresses than we actually did, just because some of that stuff burbled up through tabloidy kind of things. It would have been harder to know just how big his affairs were and to get all the gruesome details. I think this part would have been pretty. I think we've been dealing with DUIs and this kind of basic arrest pretty much the same way.
Yeah, I agree with you. The 2009 one, I went back and read this stuff I wrote about Tiger right after it happened. I did like a giant Tiger mailbag, and it was interesting rereads. Just the shock from back then. I think now that it's been a solid 7.5 years, the impact of what happened and the fact that we've been dealing with this version of Tiger for a really long time, almost the entire Obama presidency plus part of Trump. That the shock of that night and the downfall and the weird press conference with his mom there and all that stuff seems like it was 40 years ago.
I actually think that press conference is one of the most interesting parts of it, because how many times with a giant athlete, especially Tiger level giant, do we get to see the real guy? Remember at the time we all said, oh, he handled the press conference wrong. He said the wrong things. But what we now know is that's the real Tiger.
Yeah.
That's how he thought he should handle it. And to me, to get a shot of the real person reacting to something that story that's just blossoming out of control like that one was, that's amazing. I mean, that was Tiger.
Yeah.
It still is Tiger. That's the guy. We got him. Not the guy in the Nike commercial. Not the guy who's smiling and talking to Jim Nantz after the Masters. That was Tiger.
And that was the first, Twitter took off before '09. But '09 was the year Twitter really took off. That was when everybody had a handle by the end of 2009, basically. I think I launched mine maybe in April of 2009. But it was 2009, Twitter started to push news. And that was, I think, the first major sports story I remember finding out about on Twitter. Being like, whoa. I remember where I was. I was with my wife. We were having dinner. It was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I remember what restaurant we were at. It was like, whoa. Oh.
It was like Kennedy. It was like Kennedy getting shot in 2009.
It really was. House, do you remember where you were when that happened?
I do. I mean, that was at the super, super height of my all-time Tiger lust.
Yeah.
So two big sport moments that led to like real gut-wrenching, crestfallen. The news when I woke up when I'd heard that Len Bias had passed away.
Yep.
And then just this surreal 48 hours of the Tiger news, and it was a moment back when it was hard to get like instantaneous kind of news out of the Twitter cycle. It wasn't quite as robust as it is now. So there was tons of I think we had probably a half dozen telephone conversations back then about all the iterations and possibilities.
Oh my God,
that went into that.
And the conspiracy theories, because that was a whole other part that after it happened, it was like, why did it happen? What happened? It really was like from a conspiracy theory standpoint, one of the most dissected incidents of the entire 21st century so far.
And a technology thing too, because it involved his phone.
Yeah.
And text messages. It was kind of like, that was a very 2009 thing to be undone by your text messages.
I remember the split screens after we needed the press conference of his tooth, whether his tooth was colored differently than it was 2 years ago, whether she had knocked out.
Right.
I mean, it was insane. It was the internet at its best and at its worst. But man, like I was thinking the Tiger run, which was basically, when you think about the Tiger run, do you count the junior stuff, House?
Of course.
I guess you
could.
could.
Yeah, it's all part of the legend.
So it's if you go with that first amateur open that he won, which I think was 94, and that goes all the way through 08 when he wins the Open, and then 09 was Wai Yang, I think, in April, or PGA June. That was the
PGA would have been in August.
August, yeah.
For the Wai Yang.
So that's a 15-year run, and then it's over. And
well, he won five times in 2013. No majors. I don't remember. You have to go back and look and see sort of what the narrative was for why he competed.
He was one of those years. I think he made the most money of anyone. Right? Maybe that was 2013.
That was 2013. He won Player of the Year in 2013.
Yeah. It's kind of like the MJ Wizards thing, where it's like MJ scored 20 points a game on the Wizards.
Wasn't that sad though?
No, it wasn't.
Tiger didn't have the pot belly. MJ was a stocky.
Am I wrong that I think more fondly on the MJ Wizards thing than most?
Yes. Because
Okay.
I don't think
You were definitely wrong.
Okay. Because I remember
There was no fond moments.
I remember him. Nah, there were a couple. I remember him coming to
Actually,
Boston.
I went to the very first home game. It was very fun.
He came to Boston once. It was awesome. It was like this whole new generation of kids are like, oh my God, that's Michael Jordan. It was pretty cool. Well, speaking of Michael Jordan and Tiger, the finals are starting on Wednesday, and it was a rare treat to just have 9 days of speculation and wondering, and people trying to create hot takes, and then you could kind of see where everything was going. You knew LeBron versus MJ was going to be a thing. We had fun with it on the podcast last week. Now it was the Warriors were going to blow them out. Now it's starting to creep back to, oh, well, maybe Cleveland. Maybe people are counting out Cleveland. It's like, well, you're the same people who just told us the Warriors are going to win. And everyone's just bored and waiting for the finals to start. But ESPN.com had this thing on their website yesterday about whether this was the most star-studded finals ever, which I just reflexively wanted to throw up when I saw. And then I saw the case laid out, and I was like, holy shit, yeah, this might actually be 7 All-Stars. This might be the number one. It doesn't have the most Hall of Famers, but...
You're deferring to Lakers Celtics from the 80s?
So that my question is, do we want... Are we grading it on All-Stars, or are we grading it on future Hall of Famers? Because it's really hard to top Larry and Magic, two of the best 5 or 6 ever. Kareem, the third or fourth best ever. Worthy, McHale, Bill Walton on the bench. A bunch of iconic role players. Dennis Johnson, who's probably the 60th best player ever. Like, you know, I would still put 87 above all of these, 85 or 87, but I don't know, 7 All-Stars?
It's an interesting media question. Because in the 80s, those big guys seem so different. The guys seem really big now, but they seem big in a different way in the 80s.
Yeah.
In the age of television and Sports Illustrated.
Yep.
And I hear people talk about 80s basketball and they're like, everybody was an all-star back then. There's no all-stars. There's no stars now, which is obviously garbage.
Yeah, it's not true.
But the bigness of those guys is different than the bigness of the guys now, just in media terms. I don't even know how to describe it.
Well, there was a distance with the guys in the 80s. These guys now, it's like they're in our lives 24/7. Anytime they do something in a game, I'm either watching it or somebody's telling me it just happened.
We're just tired of them because we don't have to watch a tape delayed finals on CBS like we did in the early 80s.
Yeah, like Magic to me, I've said this before, but I don't know how many times I watched the 84 Lakers that year before the finals.
You didn't hear Dick Stockton do a call?
Might have been 5 times the whole year. And then in the playoffs, you got to see some. But like, House, remember when we would see West Coast teams, it was really exciting. I'd be like, oh, that's what James Worthy looks like in a Laker uniform. Like, we wouldn't even find out unless you were watching SportsCenter and they showed him doing a dunk. And now it's like these guys are just in our lives.
Part of our romanticizing those teams from the early to mid 80s is also attributable to the fact that they were pioneers, right? They saved the league. They rightfully have been recognized for saving the league. And I like the comparison to kind of the era that we're in now, because this is also kind of a pioneering era with what Golden State has managed to kind of perfect in the way of reinventing the game with a 3-and-D approach and having exactly the right personnel for it, and adding in KD this current season. I wonder if 20 years from now people will be looking back at this era and, you know, romanticizing what the Warriors and then Cleveland as the perfect foil, right? I mean, it's been a terrific 3 years here with Cleveland and Golden State back and forth, and the intrigue and which skill set is the one that's going to carry you to the title, and they've split the first 2. So I understand the point about, you know, we have such immersion into the daily grind with these guys, and I for one am so ready for them to start playing some goddamn basketball games. But trying to put the historical perspective on it, it's a loaded finals. It's great. Each of the last 3 finals feel like they've been loaded finals, and we'll see sort of how it feels 20 years from now. I look forward to having this conversation with both of you 20 years from now.
Yeah, I left that Celtics series, and I think I was bitter that I felt like the Celtics would have done better if Isaiah was there. I still think they would have lost, but I left that series thinking Cleveland has some real flaws defensively, and when they play Golden State, those flaws are going to be badly exposed, and Golden State's going to win in 5. And then the more I look at it, the more I read, the more I think about it, Cleveland has some real advantages. LeBron and Kyrie and those guys, they won a Game 7 in Golden State. I think that is the number one advantage in this series, is that they already know they can win there. Like, you have that's great. Look at how LeBron, it was different for him when he went to Boston after Game 6, 2012. Now he's like, I've won here. I'm confident. So that's one. 2 is that Kyrie, I think, really feels like he's better than Curry. I think he plays the Warriors and goes, I'm better than this guy. I'm going to prove it again. So you have 2 huge player advantages. The top 2 on the Cavs think they're better than the top 2 in the Warriors. LeBron thinks he owns Durant. He's like, what is he, 18-5 against them, something like that. So you have that. And then you have the Warriors have guys that I'm not sure they're going to be able to play, which is what I want to talk to Jarks about. He's going to come on later. But I don't know how Zaza Pachulia plays in this series. I don't know how JaVale McGee plays. The moment those guys come out, they're just going to ISO them and put them in pick and roll and just figure out ways to torture them. On the flip side, the Cavs are going to have guys that they're going to have trouble playing too. And it just seems like, to me, this series, the more I stare at it, it seems like a toss-up. And two teams that are going to be able to do things against the other team. Does that make sense? Now I sound like the talking head is trying to talk everyone in the series, but I honestly feel that way. And I forgot to mention Mike Brown. Ooh. That Mike Brown thing's a real thing. That guy's been fired 3 times. He's coaching the Warriors now. Steve Kerr said, I'm not in it.
You prefer Ty Lue?
Yeah. I prefer the Ty Lue LeBron combo. I think LeBron coaches that team. They won a Game 7 in Golden State with Ty Lue and LeBron. I don't know what Mike Brown is capable of. I watched Game 7. I know Curry's hurt. I think they've been very diplomatic about how they've handled the Curry thing. But they were terrible in the fourth quarter of Game 7, the Warriors. They just went one-on-one. They had real trouble stopping LeBron and Kyrie. And then down the stretch, the Cavs weren't even making shots. But and they still won. But I don't know. I just feel like this is I hate, if I'm a Warriors fan, I hate that the narrative has become the Warriors are going to beat the Cavs. It's not good.
That's scary.
That's not good.
I feel like I should be more generous and more gracious. We just had a wonderful 3-day weekend. We're all back to work. I ought not to get on and immediately start using less than gracious language, but I think you're a hedging pussy. I think the Golden State Warriors are going to come in and blow the doors off the Cavs.
Wow.
So the narrative that I like, and look, there is no, the analytics create wonderful storylines that suggest that this could be a very competitive series. On balance, most analytics favor Golden State. I think 538 has Golden State as a 90% likely winner here. I don't have any reason to disagree with it. What I like
House 538
is stories.
House 538 had the Cavs with a 3% chance of winning the finals on May 3rd. I just wanted to point that out.
By the way, I bet on the Cavs last year, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
The only thing I want to say is I like this story of the Warriors redeeming the best record in the NBA, the best regular season record in the NBA last season, and they couldn't validate it with the championship. So what they're going to do this year is go 16 and mother effing O in the playoffs, the first time in the history of the National Basketball Association. And they're going to come on out and just do it to it. It's a sweep. That's my call. I'm going to gamble on that call, and that's the one that I'm subscribing to.
Curtis is stunned.
Wow.
We might have to get Curtis some water.
The sweep?
The sweep pick is really bold. I like it.
It does feel like we're in the 2-week break before the Super Bowl, and this is Wednesday before the Super Bowl, and we've just like, okay, what have we not argued?
Right.
What scenario are we? Is tomorrow Cavs sweep day? You know, can we talk ourselves
feels
into
like
that?
That's not happening. I love the way Curry's playing, and I think that's a huge advantage for the Warriors is that he's a different guy, and he's got his mojo back, and Durant, I think, is going to be super motivated. LeBron's going to have to guard Durant. I'm gonna wait until tomorrow's BS podcast on the Wednesday edition to give my finals pick, but I did want to talk about finals odds with you guys. House, you ready?
I'm ready. I mean, this is the thing. I this is what the
Durant,
anchor of my
I'm going to give you
prediction.
all of them. Durant plus 200, LeBron plus 210, Steph Curry plus 225, Draymond plus 800, Kyrie 12-1, Klay Thompson 20-1, Kevin Love 30-1. Nobody else is relevant. I think Kyrie is I'm not saying he's the best bet. I think the odds are the best for him, 12-1.
Yes.
Because if the Cavs win, one of the reasons they could win is Kyrie just going off and torching the Warriors and averaging 38 a game and doing what he did. I mean, House, I've never in my life seen somebody, and this is not a denigration because this is pure respect. I've never seen anyone make more terrible shots than he did in that Boston series. He's just great at it. He makes 28 footers with a hand in his face. Like even Curry's 3-pointers aren't as ridiculous as Kyrie when Kyrie gets hot. They're ridiculous, and he makes them all the time. So I don't know. I think 12-1 is interesting for him. What do you think, House?
I like it. The problem I have with Kyrie is that means he has to jump over LeBron, and LeBron, I expect, if the Cavs win, will be playing both ways. So we're going to have 2 or 3 or maybe 5 unbelievable defensive plays that will be fresh in our minds, and we're not going to get any defensive plays out of Kyrie, which is why, even though 12-1 is good. So I have a little menu as I'm wanting to do. You know, I'm inclined to allocate a little capital this time of year.
Yeah.
The one that I like is Draymond at plus 800.
Okay.
And the theory there is that Steph and KD cancel each other out, and Draymond basically has a final series just like he had last year. He just has to replicate, you know, being meaningful in the 5 different categories that he's capable of doing. And then, you know, Steph and KD will trade games under this theory of you know, leading the hedge. The hedge. So that's one. I'm gonna play Draymond at the plus 800. I'm also thinking about a nice parlay. I like KD.
Yeah.
Alongside with the Warriors in 5. So that's my hedging P-word play. If it's the Warriors in 5, KD as kind of leading the way, because on balance the Warriors will defer to him. They've demonstrated that. I mean, that's why I think we've seen the very best postseason Steph ever. It's because he is the healthiest he's been in the postseason, and that's because of Kevin Durant's impact on the team over the course of the regular season. But I think in this finals, KD's first taste of this with this group. I know that he played as a young guy for the Thunder, but he has an expectation of winning. I think there's kind of you could talk yourself into deferring. So KD at plus 200, Warriors in 5 at plus 240. The parlay calculator says that's a 9-1 bet. That's a nice plus 920.
I think KD is if you think the Warriors are winning, I think KD is the best bet because he'd have to guard LeBron, and he's going to have to protect the rim, and you know they're really going to need him because rim protection last year, if you remember, especially when they had to play Azili, and who was the other guy they had to throw out there? I'm blanking now. After Bogut, they'd throw a couple guys out there that were not great. And the craziest thing in the series is both teams. It might just be both teams playing 7 guys because they're going to have all the rest from it, you know. And like in Game 1, I think the Cavs could get away with playing 7 guys. They're not playing again until Sunday. They'd have 3 days off, and I think the Cavs have to win Game 1.
If we talk about what the media wants to happen, KD feels right.
That's a good angle. What does the media want for stories from Game 1? KD sucking would be their number one choice, right?
So then he can
the redemption of KD in Game 2.
But to the Draymond MVP theory.
Yeah.
There could after what happened last year in the finals, there could be
the finals for them.
An annoying but powerful Draymond grows up storyline.
At 8-1, I love it, Bryan Curtis.
Draymond grows up.
Draymond grows up 8-1. Let's do this.
Or the flip side of it, Draymond can't grow up after Game 3 when he gets tossed for getting into a fight with Dante Jones. Yeah, I think so. Let's try to guess all the narratives, right? 7-game series, we'll say. Game 1, Cavs win. Durant's underwhelming. KD's a loser. KD, that's why he went to the Warriors, because he knew he wasn't good enough. He's not as good as LeBron. LeBron owns KD. That's Game 1.
Good.
Game 2, Durant scores 48 points. Chip on his shoulder. KD grew up. This is the game. This is the transformation game for him.
My time is now. This is my title.
This is his time. Yeah, he showed that he's important. Game 3, the Kyrie Irving 49-point game. They can't stop Kyrie. This is unbelievable. The Cavs are going to win. House, do you like all this so far?
Yeah, I like it. I'm enjoying it.
Game 4, Cavs are going to win. They're going to win in 5 or 6. The Warriors are done. Mike Brown gets killed after Game 3. Mike Brown. Oh my God, Steve Kerr. Could Steve Kerr come back? Mike Brown's ruining this series. Game 4, Steph and Clay hit like 28 threes.
You ignore Steph Curry at your peril.
Yeah.
Remember Steph Curry?
Remember Steph Curry?
I love it.
Now it's 2-2 going back to the Golden State for Game 5. They win Game 5. It's a classic. Both teams are great. Now it's like greatest series ever.
Ooh, yeah.
Greatest ever?
That's when
best
that-
ever?
that's when that
This is
comes
the best
in.
ever? That's game 5. Game 6, Warriors up early. Draymond does something dumb.
Oh, history repeats itself.
LeBron puts up like the 49, 11, and 16. LeBron's the game 6 narratives. LeBron's the best. We forgot about LeBron.
LeBron wouldn't allow his team to lose.
Yeah. Not on his floor.
Not on my floor.
Can Mike Brown control Draymond at the worst possible time? And then it goes 7. It's going 7, House. I can see it now.
And Steve Kerr back to the bench for game
Steve
7.
Kerr back. Steve Kerr back.
One
I'm going
game.
7.
Coach, just one game.
I'm going 7. And then we go into 7. It's like they've won there before. They've already won a 7 on the road. They have the best player for one game. It's trouble. We'll see. The Warriors, they've never really beaten LeBron and Kyrie together.
How about the Steve Kerr, Willis Reed walkout in game 7? He's
so
here. He's got his little chalkboard. He's here.
That'd be unbelievable. Quick break to talk about Miller Lite, the official sponsor of TheRinger.com, my official beer since I was in college in the late 80s. They're brewed not just to taste great, but also to be less filling. Only 96 calories and won't fill you up. It's brewed to be enjoyed from tip-off to final buzzer. It's the original light beer and has been since we first showed up courtside in 1975. I'm saying we because I've been on the Miller Lite team ever since they did the Red Auerbach, Casey Jones, Satch Sanders, Sam Jones, that whole poster. It's in the Ringer studio. Anyway, Miller Lite, the official sponsor of TheRinger.com. All right, House, did I talk you into 7 games or no? You still say sweep?
I'm going to root for 7 games, but I'm going to gamble on a sweep.
I will say I think LeBron with rest that's a legit thing. I think he's going to be awesome in game 1. Another 2.5 days till game 2. It's good. The way this is spaced out with these 18 days for 7 games is perfect for him. All right, House, we're letting you go.
Fantastic.
I will talk to you by text as we try to figure out what to do. When are you getting invited on Cousin Sal's pod? Are your feelings hurt
I don't
yet?
know.
He's done 3.
Well, the U.S. Open's right around the corner.
Yeah.
And I'm already formulating some points of view. In fact, quick plug for the Shack House. We have noted Miller Lite aficionado Kevin Kisner on today's podcast. Kevin Kisner, who just won the Dina DeLuca Invitational down in Fort Worth, Texas.
Great.
And we also are going to talk a lot of Tiger on today's Shack House. So be sure to check that out.
Try not to get fired. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
All right, before we talk about Frank Deford, what is worse than having lousy sheets? I remember being in college and trying to prolong the same set of sheets for weeks because I didn't feel like doing the laundry. I still have nightmares about it. Guess what? Great sleep starts with the right sheets, and they're more affordable than you think. With Boll and Branch, they make the most comfortable sheets you'll ever sleep on. Fall asleep faster, sleep deeper, wake up ready to kick some ass. Each sheet is crafted from 100% organic cotton. Feel incredible, look amazing. And since Boll and Branch sells exclusively online, there's no expensive retail markup. Half the price, twice the quality. Anyone who sleeps on Boll and Branch sheets loves them. That's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews, raves in the New York Times and Forbes. Even 3 U.S. presidents have Boll and Branch sheets. Go to bollandbranch.com today. You'll get $50 off your first set of sheets, plus free shipping when you use the promo code BS. Try them for 30 nights. If you're not impressed, return them for a full refund. $50 off, plus free shipping right now at bollandbranch.com. We called Jonathan Charks, and his phone was too spotty, and the connection wasn't good enough. So we unfortunately had to cut that. He's going to be on the Ringer NBA show on Wednesday. He has a big piece about Kevin Durant coming out this week on the Ringer, and he was a huge part of our NBA draft guide. So I'm going to have him back on when we have a better phone connection. But the 2 things he told us was he thought that the Cavs were going to attack the Warriors' big guys, and that he thought the series could go 6. But listen to him on Ringer NBA show if you want to hear the thing. Sorry about the phone connection. All right, Brian Curtis and I are going to talk about Frank Deford, and then we're going to close it. So, first of all, the timing was weird. Memorial Day, which is a day we're just thinking about, kind of thinking backwards, thinking about all the people that served the country and people that lost their lives, all this stuff, and you're already in kind of that not nostalgic. What's the right word?
Yeah. Nostalgic.
Sad. I don't know. So it's always a strange day. It's always weird that it's a holiday.
Kind of a fugue state. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Deford dies in the morning, West Coast time, which I had heard rumors that his health wasn't great, but didn't know it was that bad. You had him on the podcast, what, a year ago that we ran on Channel 33?
Last summer, I want to say.
Was his health okay when you talked to him? It seemed like it was, right?
Yeah, and he was always he'd had problems over the last couple of years. He would say, I remember calling him one time, I had pneumonia. I'm just out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And I was calling him about some stupid thing. I was like, are you okay to do this? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then he'd talk for 45 minutes in perfect paragraphs.
Yeah.
And everything was quotable, and it was Frank Deford.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about it for the last 24 hours, and I read a lot of the pieces, including your excellent one on The Ringer. And, I just think that era of journalism where somebody wrote a piece, and if it was the right person, it became an event in itself, I think is gone for sports. The stuff is too fast. It's too furious. No movie analogy on that, but it's just coming too fast. There's so many takes. There's so much writing. And even if somebody has an awesome piece, that might even command the landscape for a day. The difference with Deford and just that era and how we consume stuff and read stuff is like he had a piece. It was like a 5-day event. It came out. Yeah, it was like, oh my God, Deford has a piece in SI, and it was, you read it and go to school, talk about it with friends, and it just, and the magazine itself would live on for days. Maybe you go back 3 days later, read it again. We didn't have nearly as many reading options back then. He was the best. I think there was certainly a point, I would say from 76 to 84 was just undisputed. Every big feature that he wrote was the most important feature anyone wrote that month. And I don't see that happening again. Do you?
I think we still have events, but they're really short, as you say.
Yeah.
Wright Thompson piece goes from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m.
And then we begin to move on. He does a couple of TV shows and it's done.
And we say, it's on Deadspin.
Right.
We just kind of lose the train of thought. A big Sports Illustrated feature, but nothing like the Deford and later Gary Smith and later Rick Riley when he would do a big feature that would just grab you by the lapels, I feel, and shake you all week. Also having it on paper because you'd keep it around.
Yeah.
And then maybe go open it the next day again and say, I want to read this again, or I have it on my nightstand. It felt more permanent in a way than pieces do now.
When he did the coach about, what was his name, Bull Sullivan?
Toughest coach there ever was.
Toughest coach ever was, and it was the cover story. I mean, I remember getting that in the mailbox and going, "Oh my God, the Ford's on the cover!" Like it was substantial. It really mattered. And then you go through, it's like, oh, look how long this is. I got to carve out 45 minutes. What's the 45 minutes I'm going to devote to this?
Pace myself and be just in the right frame of mind, so I'm ready for it.
Yeah, and there were a lot of people doing it, and I don't think he was necessarily the best, right? Like the ceiling of his writing was the highest, but I think he was the best at it for 10 years. I still think Mark Cram's piece about Frazier and Ali, the third fight, is the best thing I ever read in that magazine. And I think there were guys that had as much talent as Deford, but I think the time, the execution, the people that he picked, he was really smart at picking high profile, important people and writing about them, which I think is probably the thing that prevented Gary Smith from being remembered that same way. Like Gary Smith's, a lot of his best pieces were pretty obscure subjects, and Frank Deford was like, I'm writing about Bill Russell and I'm writing
Jimmy
about
Connors.
Bobby Knight and Jimmy Connors and Arthur Ashe and all these big important people.
But let's not forget that Deford did have this kind of kitschy Americana thing going on, because that coach in Mississippi, as he says in the first line of that piece, nobody's ever heard of.
Right.
None of us have ever heard of. He did roller derby. He did a Sports Illustrated piece, refresh my memory, Bill, on Jeopardy. He did one on Miss America, which I think became a book. He had this thing where he also
Billy Kahn was a strange, that was what, 35, 40 years after.
That was kind of a nostalgia zone piece. But he also did one about...
I didn't know who Billy Kahn was.
No clue.
Yeah.
I won't claim that I did. He also did one about traveling with his family around Florida, I think. He went to all the crappy roadside attractions with his family. He had a side of him too that was like, I'm going to go just Frank Deford up this thing in American culture. and bring all the kind of weird power to it. It was weird. It was a funny. He wrote 20 books. It said in the obit 20.
He wrote 20 books?
Because there's all these books you don't even know existed. Novels. I think Miss America became a book. We were saying you were reading a Miller Lite ad. Frank Deford was big enough that he was in a Miller Lite ad with Billy Martin, Tastes Great, Less Filling, and shameless enough that he wrote a book about the Miller Lite Tastes Great campaign. Like, I mean, think of that.
Amazing.
Think of that guy. I mean, he was just. I was also struck by looking at pictures of him and stuff. The sports writer who not only tells us how to write by example, we can't be that good, but shows us, but also how to act, how to dress, how to carry yourself as this kind of like character out of some like movie.
Right. He bridged the two eras from the 50s, 60s era of the sports writer to which, you know, you pointed out in your piece, but like by the time the 80s rolled around, you had Inside Sports was also doing a lot of the same great stuff for only for 2.5 years. But that was the first time I really felt like all these, and I was at the right age group for it too. But I just felt like these guys are my heroes, like Frank Deford, Gary Smith. Riley comes in the mid 80s, like, who's this guy? Oh, and then he writes some of it. Then he immediately jumps on that side. That's when the best American sports writing book started to take off, and before it turned into a self-parody. But the 80s, I think, were the best era for here's a big ass, well-written piece, and this is important, and you're going to think about it for a couple days.
Yes. And that could command your attention. Because what people who are younger than us, Bill, don't remember is those days there was local media.
Yeah.
Your sports page. And then there was national media. Now we're all national now. There's like barely any local left. We're all national writers. But then it was an elect, right? If you were Deford, Curry Kirkpatrick, Riley in that Sports Illustrated, Alexander Wolf, Jack McCallum, you'd made it to this tier that no one else had.
You
and
had
if you
a
were really
special power.
good at it, like Frank Deford was and Riley was, ooh,
Right.
you were on this Olympus.
Yeah, I remember when Frank Deford wrote about Joe Delaney in the early 80s, because Joe Delaney drowned trying to save these two kids but couldn't swim. And it's a story I just wouldn't have known if he didn't write about it. You know, there's an incredible amount of power that Sports Illustrated, Inside Sports during the couple years specifically had, where if they shone their light on somebody, it pushed them to a whole different level of recognizability. Joe Delaney was this running back who died. Lots of people died in the 70s and 80s. And it was like, oh, this is sad. The guy drowned. Then Deford wrote about it. And now he's like, I love Joe Delaney. I still love him 35 years later. And the story's incredible. And that was the power those magazines had. Now, if that Joe Delaney thing happens, there's probably 3 different features written about him in the first year. And it's
TV.
He just becomes the latest. Oh, here's another thing, and it goes through the vortex.
The 30 for 30s in production already, and we're off and running.
It's like, oh, here's some content, which, you know, obviously we're part of too, and we're always looking for good stories,
and that's awesome.
It's
you
great.
Don't have to wait.
It's great. My point is, in the 80s, we didn't have that, and something like Joe Delaney, there's probably 25 other stories that were probably as good as that or as interesting or stuff that would have resonated with us, and they just kind of went away.
We should also talk about the fact that he picked basketball as his first big sport at SI is huge. Gets to SI, I was looking through his memoir last night, and nobody at the magazine knows what basketball is, almost at all. And he goes to them and goes,
it's
hey,
an irrelevant sport.
There's this guy named Bill Bradley at Princeton where I just graduated from, who we should probably do a piece about. And he does it. And then he goes and does the NBA. And there's that great, I borrowed that anecdote from his thing. He's on a plane doing a cover story on John Havlicek. And Havlicek is sitting in coach, and Frank Deford, a 20-something writer for Sports Illustrated, is sitting in first class. And Havlicek has to come to first class to be interviewed by Frank Deford.
Right.
I mean, that's like in steerage on the Titanic. That's like Leo on the Titanic coming up to see Kate Winslet. I mean, that's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. When I did my basketball book, which I spent 3 years on, and the first year and a half just reading everything. And at that point, the SI vault was there, so I could go back. And I had some of the old SIs too, but it was really hard to find anything from the late 60s, early 70s, stuff like that. I was astonished by how many NBA pieces he wrote. mean, he basically was there for Bill Russell's last couple years at SI and then going all the way through. And then eventually people like John Papanek and Curry Kirkpatrick, people like that started to write about it. But they're little snapshots of not just who mattered at the time, but also some of the issues that America had at the time. You know, the Connors piece, which is my favorite piece that he ever wrote, is probably a piece that would get somebody in trouble now. A man raised by two women to conquer man. I'm sure people would be like, well, why does it blah, blah, blah. And, you know, so he is, when you reread some of those, they definitely feel era specific.
Yes.
And
he also was much better. I think I borrowed this line for he's a better marathoner than he was a sprinter.
Yeah, no question.
If he had to, like, when he wrote more crank columns than any smart person I've ever seen. Whether it was, he was like the world's best credentialed soccer troll.
Right.
And he just kept coming out. You find like old issues of SI and he's just killing soccer. And you're like, what is he doing?
Yeah. He did, the reinvention of Deford. So he leaves SI in the late 80s to go form the National. And there's a great book about the history of Sports Illustrated that I highly recommend. That has a long chapter about Deford leaving, and there was really a lot of bitterness.
Yes.
I mean, on the level of like me leaving ESPN level of bitterness with him in SI. Where
Definitely.
He was like persona non grata. And
they like took $1 million from, he was owed, he felt about like $1 million
yeah,
of promised money, and they wouldn't give it to him.
and they were
this is Michael McCambridge's The Franchise.
yeah, and he was also going after SI writers, which I think they felt like was totally uncalled for. Goes to the National, has unlimited money to spend, and
For 18 months.
And assembles this great writing staff. And I can't even describe how great that newspaper was when we were forming Grantland in 2011. And I really wanted to do some oral histories, and that was the first one. It was like the first one we were doing is the National, because I have yet to read anything that captured how important that and influential that newspaper was, and also how crazy it was that it failed because of a bad business plan, not because it was good. And we ended up getting this awesome oral history, and he felt, I think, part guilty, but also part still incredulous that it was such a disaster, where, you know, like unpaid bills and just crazy stories. But yet he had a great eye for talent and assembled a bunch of awesome people, a lot of whom went on to have big careers afterwards.
I'm amazed that Charles P. Pierce, our old pal, and Chris Mortensen were both touched by Frank Deford.
Right.
Just think how different those two people are. I mean, they're on the opposite sides of the moon.
Yeah, seriously.
And he had a hand in all of them. This literary godfather. That was his Dick Schaap period. We talked about Schaap on the pod a few weeks ago. Right. That was his Schaap period.
He also, he did some ESPN stuff before. I remember Walsh told me a story once about how he became very friendly with Deford, and Deford was doing like ESPN commentaries or whatever. And Deford would always say to him, I don't understand why HBO isn't using SI people, because they were owned by the same company at that point. And then all of a sudden Real Sports is like, hey, we're going to use Frank Deford, and grabbed him. And then he had like this third act. He's doing NPR commentaries. He's doing Real Sports. He's kind of reinvented himself as this older, as you said, a little curmudgeonly. And the stuff that he did on Bryan Gumbel's show, I always loved when he was on.
It was great.
They had like a great interaction. He was always like offended by Bryant for a second. Oh, I don't know about that, Bryant. Like Bryant would be like, and Frank, you spent time with this guy, and you really thought, oh no, I'm not saying that, Bryant. And they would just kind of go at it. I always enjoyed it.
But they were all in awe of him on that show.
And with reason.
Because he was the, you know, the great generational talent, and he was a little older.
Yeah. And he looked the part. He looked like an actor hired to play.
With the pocket square and the slick back hair and the mustache. Hair.
My mom always thought he was super handsome. She's like, oh, you got to set me up with Frank Deford. But
yeah, and
my nephew laughed at that one.
The NPR thing blows me away.
Yeah,
because
he did 1,600 commentaries.
1,600, and people all the time I meet who don't know anything about sports, don't care about sports, don't want to know about sports, go, oh, I love that Frank Deford.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can be one of those guys who bolts out of sports and touches people. Like the only other, I mean, there are a couple of people. Riley probably did it for a little while. Red Smith was kind of the classic, like, oh, he's so worldly, he's so smart, turned such a good phrase. That was Frank on NPR. He was, for people that didn't give a shit about any of this stuff, he was their voice. He was their way into sports.
I think you made a good point earlier about how the difference between local and national and how split it was.
Yeah.
Because I remember when ESPN hired me in 2001 and I asked for like 5 weeks off to try to figure out how to write a national column, because the roadmap at that point was just local columns. And I think Riley had his SI column at that point, but it was 800 words. It was done a specific way. I didn't want to do an imitation of that. But I really had trouble figuring it out and had to map out all these different ways, things that I thought might work, to try to get people outside of my little sphere, which is basically Boston, to care, because that's how people wrote sports columns. If you're in Boston, you wrote mostly about Boston sports. If you were in Chicago, you wrote mostly about Chicago. And even if you wrote national, you tied in the local sports as the connection.
Sure.
And now it's the opposite. But anyway, the thing with Deford is he was the national guys for us was basically SI. And Inside Sports for 2.5 years, and the National for 18 months, and Rudy Martzke. But we didn't have there wasn't a lot of sports writing connections for, if you're in Texas and I'm in Boston and we start talking about sports writing, we only had like 6 guys to talk about.
We weren't reading the same guys.
No. You'd be like, hey, did you read, what was his name? Blackie Sherrod?
Blackie Sherrod, yeah.
Blackie Sherrod? I wouldn't have read One Piece. And I would have been like, did you read Ray Fitzgerald? You're like, no.
Who? Okay, who?
Frank Deford? Yeah. Did you read the Bobby Knight piece? Yeah. And then we're talking.
And it's funny how people solve that problem, right? You ultimately solved it by just writing about Boston anyway.
Right. I had to.
And also doing movies and other things.
I did pop culture, yeah.
Riley solves it by doing heartstring tugging little stories. Like, here's a universal thing a lot, right?
Yep.
And then he writes about Tiger and John Elway. And
Sammy Sosa was a big
sure,
one.
and that was a big one. But he would also do like, here's a story you've never heard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to grab you with this one. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal to be that strapping national. I mean, Deford also just like, you mentioned Real Sport. He just had this career where he kind of followed his nose around.
Yeah.
And he was seemingly open to anything. The other thing we should say about him is he was also a nice guy.
Everybody liked him.
To me, he was a nice guy. And then I read all the things and it was like, oh, he answered the phone for everybody.
Yeah.
People would send him crappy articles they wrote as a kid, and he'd send back, somebody said 6 typed pages, I think it was Karen Krause of the Times, of critiques. I mean, this is a guy who was a huge writer and was busy.
Yeah.
And he was bothering to do that. It makes you want to answer your email, doesn't it? When somebody writes you an email and says, hey, man, can you read my stories? And you go, oh, no, this again. But he did all that stuff for a lot of people.
In like 2005, ESPN ran a documentary about Frank Deford, which I think was called You Write Better Than You Play. And they had done it before with Dick Schaap, which I think that one was called In His Own Words. That was awesome. And I remember hearing about the Deford one and going, oh, they're going to do the Dick Schaap thing with Deford? Like, that's not cool. Like, the Dick Schaap thing was great. You can't do that again. And then they did it with Deford. It was awesome. And a big part of it was about his daughter who had cystic fibrosis. And she passed away, I think, when she was 8. And about how that affected him and his career. And it was really well done. And I went to look for it on online yesterday. It's just there's no trace of it. So I would love to see ESPN at some point. I'm sure they have space on ESPN too. They should run the Deford thing and they should run the Schaap thing again, because those were both awesome. And especially for Deford, it's really affecting and it's good. And it puts his career in the proper perspective.
Because not many guys touch that many big athletes.
Yeah.
And also we're from that 60s tone that really, I mean, you saw Poznansky like writing a big piece yesterday. When I said like in my thing that Dan Jenkins and Deford were hired the same year at SI, which is a miracle.
Yeah.
And Dan was much older, but and much more experienced. But like those guys really set the tone, I feel, for the next generation that came after them. All those guys like Lupa, kind of they looked at those two.
Yeah.
And wanted to be kind of one of those two guys.
Yeah.
Dan was a deadline writer. Give me the ball. Masters just ended. Give me the rock. I got this. I'm going to sit down on my typewriter in an hour, write the best story you ever read. Frank was more immersive. I'm going to go find who the real Jimmy Connors is. Dan wouldn't care about that. and they set two different kind of paths. The other thing
And they both inspired some of the worst sports writing of all time too. We should mention that. People imitated them.
horrible, right?
Yeah.
I think in Frank's case, at least, he wrote so plainly. You mentioned this. I mean, it's like you read his pieces, you don't feel like you're reading super highfalutin language. They're super plain. They're not.
It was very tight.
He was so clever how he was able to just do these very simple but brilliant sentences and just put them all together in all this detail, and you'd be like, whoa.
He was very accessible.
Yes.
It wasn't. Yes. There are other guys who tried to do the fancy Deford impersonations that 4 paragraphs of nothing starting the feature just to flex their literary muscles. And Deford, he didn't really do that much of that.
No, you mentioned Mark Cram. That's the guy on the other side of the world from Frank Deford.
Yeah, but Mark Cram was probably the best at that version.
He could do that version. I mean, Frank reads like a guy who spent his formative years at Time Inc.
Yeah.
Don't blow people away. This is a national magazine for the masses.
Yeah.
Don't write over people's heads.
Some of my favorite Halberstam stuff, and they both use the same trick where they didn't really rely on quotes. Mm-hmm. And they spent a lot of time with somebody and then wrote what they thought the person, and they just framed it in a way where it's not like, and then he said this, and then here's the next quote. They didn't do that. If they used quotes, it was always sparingly, and they might use one sentence.
And Frank would find the best quotes.
Yeah.
He would find this killer thing. I had the one in there when Bill Russell kind of comes out of exile in 1999. And he writes a piece that won the National Magazine Award, I think. And Tommy Heinsohn said he won 11 titles in 12 years. And they named the fucking tunnel for Ted Williams.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and going, whoa.
And that was a throwback to Ford.
It was. Ford, he was kind of coming out of exile.
I mean, how old was he died when he was 78 when he died? So he was probably like 60 when he wrote that, which is pretty late for a feature writer.
I remember the whole theme of the piece was he and Russell were old men.
Yeah.
And kind of reconnecting after a time.
Well, he was a great writer, and he just obviously an inspiration to anybody who does this for a living, but just in general, just a great writer at a great point for that magazine. I feel, 75 to 84 is probably the best, the stretch when SI mattered the most because it reached the most people. More people cared about sports. There's more sports to write about
and watch on TV.
The writing was better. There was more of a connection. It had more of a place. It had less competition. And, the cover would come out and it was just the one picture on the cover with the one title, and it really mattered who was on the cover. And he was the guy for them. So, it was awesome. So anyway, there was some people wrote some good pieces. There's good links to some of this stuff. I love the Connors one. I think the Moses one is a really interesting reread, as we discussed, for a lot of different reasons. I think the Bobby Knight, the Rabbit Hunter, is an all-timer. The one he wrote about Russell. But really, there's 20, 25 pieces that you can reread depending on what you care about. And I think, you're not going to be disappointed, right?
Absolutely. Oh, no. There are very few bad reads. They're almost all pretty great.
The only take that I hate was like he created the hashtag long form. It's like I just hate hashtag long form. No offense to
don't smear his legacy.
It's like long form started 10 years ago. It was like long form. Sports Illustrated started long form in 1954, but before that, I just don't like the word. It's just writing's good writing.
It's so dumb.
It could be 8,000 words. It could be 800 words. Like we don't need to be like long form. Like this is some. Basically, long form means it's going to take a lot of time to read this piece.
Yes, and I was about to say that. I don't think I would never say Frank Deford's articles were great because they were long.
Good long form. It's just they were just
the
good.
Reason. Yeah.
I never liked when people would call Grantland a long form site because it was like, so how do you explain the Dave Jacoby's reality columns and the bad quarterback league and all the other stuff we were doing? Like that stuff wasn't long form. Anyway, he was just a good writer and had a huge influence on a lot of people. R.I.P. to him. That is it for the BS podcast. Thanks to Bryan Curtis.
Thanks, Bill.
You were a little bit almost on the DL. We coaxed a good performer. You're a little sick.
Sorry, I'm on just a little allergy-ridden voice. Apologies to the audience.
Thanks to Boll and Branch for sponsoring today's podcast. Great sleep starts with the right sheets. They're more affordable than you think with Boll and Branch. Go to bollandbranch.com today to get their 100% organic cotton crafted sheets, and you'll get $50 off your first set of sheets plus free shipping when you use the promo code BS. You happy with your sheets, Bryan?
Now I am, but at age early 30s, late 20s, college, it was a mess.
College,
it was
man.
Gross.
Oh my God. That would be a good documentary. It's just people's sheets in college. How disgusting they are. Just all of you should get Bow and Branch. Nephew Kyle, how are your sheets?
Not as good as they could be.
Oh, Nephew Kyle needs Bow and Branch sheets. Thanks to CreditWise from Capital One. Kyle, how's your credit?
Just got a Capital One credit card, actually.
Great. The free app lets you track the factors that make up your credit health using information from your TransUnion credit report. You can check it anytime without negatively impacting your credit. Download CreditWise today. Are you doing a Channel 33 pod this week, possibly?
I might.
Might? All right. Check out Bryan's doing some really good. What was your favorite Channel 33 media podcast you've done so far?
Ooh.
All right, you don't have to pick.
I always defer to Shoemaker on Trump and wrestling. I mean, that's, All
right, so
David
there
and I
you
having
go.
a conversation in any form. It's great.
Curtis is on Channel 33. Sports, media, politics, the intersection of all three.
The press box is
The
what
press
we're calling
box
it.
is
Finally.
what we're calling it. Yeah, we have that. I have a title for that. Don't forget to subscribe to Larry Wilmore's new podcast. Don't forget about Cousin Sal's new podcast as well. Don't forget to go to theringer.com, and we will be back on the BS podcast later this week.